Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this almost Friday. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from in the chat, and if you're tuning in on YouTube, head on over to behance.net/live/Adobe Live, and there's a ton of monkey emojis in the chat. This must be Andrew's doing. This has to be Andrew's doing. Barrel of Monkeys released. Hey, Janine and Monica and Sam, Patricia and Vipin and Howard and Amna, Camila, welcome everyone. Jack is in the house. Great to see all of you and all of the monkey emojis. This has to be Andrew. I'm gonna just peg it on Andrew. It's gotta be him. All right, so Daily Creative Challenge, day number 8? 8, I believe it's 8. We're probably on day number 8. And we got some fun stuff going on today. We're gonna have a little bit of fun. We're gonna break from the social media app that we have been creating. You can use this in the social media app, but it's gonna be a fun one. So if you're brand new to these challenges, this round is coming to an end in just a few days. Tomorrow, actually. But a new one is going to be starting up next Tuesday, so don't fret if you missed it, but you can still catch up. Head on over to behance.net/challenge/XD. That's where we're going to find all the information about these challenges. Every single day, Monday to Friday, except the first Monday, you are going to receive a challenge. Some of them are themed, some of them connect, some of them are completely different. You never know what you're going to get. You can join us in our Discord community chat, and if I hop over here, we have 45,000 designers in Discord. It's incredible. It's a lot of people, great people, and you can share your work. I definitely encourage you to share some of your work, especially for the daily challenges. We've got some great mentors, including Alexis and Matt and Melody and Tim and Marissa. You can ask questions if you want to see tips and tricks or get the lowdown on what's new in Adobe XD. You can do that here in Discord too, or if you just want to talk about whatever, feel free, have fun. So you can also watch me live. Well, at least the last 2 weeks you can watch me live, about 2 o'clock Pacific time. Next week, I believe Peter Del Tondo is coming up. Great stuff, as always. And of course, you can share your work. So I showed you how to share your work on Discord. You can also share it on Behance using the keyword XD Daily Challenge. I'm not saying this series is coming to an end. I am sad. I'm sad too. I'm always sad when these come to an end, but another challenge is coming up next week, and I will be back in a few weeks with another daily challenge, which is going to be super fun. We've got some good stuff in store. So let's do a little bit of a catch-up. Last Tuesday, we started off this process with our sign-in screen using components. We moved on to our navigation bar, which was built using component states, and then we designed a social feed, and we used anchor links to scroll right back up to the top. We also included some sound effects in there, which was super cool. We explored search and discovery using plugins. Vipin says, turtleneck Howard, indeed, right? Do you like it? I like it. It's very comfy. And then we went on to our profile settings, and we used overlays, also components for that as well. And then we also built out a messaging experience using content-aware layout. And yesterday, we explored how to create a floating action button using masks and Auto-Animate. Today, we're going to take that animation up a notch, and we're going to be designing out an animated heart. And this is a little bit of a hint at what's going to be coming tomorrow in my masterclass at 12 o'clock Pacific time. So let's hop over to Adobe XD. Here's where we are so far. We've got our sign-in experience over to the left, our social feed, search, our messaging, our menu, and then we have our fab button. And if I go ahead and go through this very quickly, we can press sign in. We've got our fab menu that we designed yesterday. We can switch on over. We've got cool sound effects, right? And if we scroll down, we can press on the, I forgot, I unwired that one by mistake. But you can go through the different screens, right? We've got our messaging and our overlay as well. So today, again, we're breaking from the social media aspect of things, and we're going to be designing and animating a fun heart. You could, of course, use this, and I'll show you how to use this in your application. Might be a bit overkill, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So here we go. We're going to grab our rectangle, our artboard tool, and I'm just going to draw out an artboard just like this. Now, of course, because this is a heart and you might want to use it within your social feed, for example, you could go ahead and design it at this size, this tiny little size here. Sometimes I find it beneficial to design a lot larger and then shrink it down later, and I'm going to show you how to do that shortly. So we've got our artboard. I'm going to name this heart. Not all caps. There we go. Fun and fancy. I agree. It's going to be fun. A literal heart? No, it won't be a literal heart, Kerwin. At least I don't think so. You never know where this is going to go. All right, so we've got our artboard looking pretty good, and now we need to design that heart. Of course, you could go ahead and go into your plugins panel. You can go into a plugin and type out heart, grab one of these, pop it into Adobe XD. However, many of you may not know that there's a secret Easter egg inside of Adobe XD. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to select the polygon tool, this one right over here, right? You're going to draw one out. I'm going to hold down my shift key to constrain this, just so it's a nice perfect triangle. You can position it in the center of your artboard if you want, doesn't really matter. And now over to the right, within your properties inspector, you've got a few options, right? You can control how many sides this polygon has, the corner radius, and also the star ratio. So if you want to turn into a star, you can do that. However, if you hop into the first text field and you simply type out less than 3, just like that, and you press return, ooh, you've got a heart. Isn't that fancy? I think it's fancy. Now for this one, I'm going to turn off the fill, and we do want a bit of a border because this is essentially going to be the inactive state. So I'm going to bump up the size quite a bit. I don't know, somewhere around 15 pixels looks pretty nice. And now we have an inactive heart, very similar to what we have over here, right? So Vipin is saying, I have a doubt. Ooh, you couldn't go back to the home page from the overlay menu page while clicking outside. Is it because the overlay is completely covering the artboard? I think I know what you're talking about. Yes, I believe that could be the case, but I believe at some point you were able to do that, but just by re-clicking on the overlay. I'll have to look into that again, but you can always wire up a back button like we did down here and solve all of your problems. That way you can go back to whatever artboard you were on using the previous artboard interaction, right? Camila is saying, what other shape can you do with this tool? So that's the only Easter egg that I believe XD has, but with the polygon tool, you can also make stars using the properties over to the right. All right, so we've got our heart, right? Now, the concept of this animation is that when the heart is tapped on, it's going to fill up, kind of like liquid. And again, this is a little bit of a hint as to what I'm going to be doing tomorrow in my masterclass. So there are a few ways to do this, but to really give that impression of liquid, I'm actually going to be using 2 different layers. So to start, I'm going to grab my rectangle, and I'm going to initially fill out the entire thing. So I'm going to draw out a long rectangle right across here. Now this looks very long, but it's definitely going to help when the animation is taking place. Now, we want it to be nice and curvy. We want to kind of flow as the heart is filling up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to double click on the shape to access the path, and I'm going to add a few points at the top. So maybe one right about here, maybe one right about here, and one about here. So we have 3 points in the middle, and then of course the 2 at the end. Now if I were to simply start dragging these around, and let me go ahead and change the color of this to a red, just so we can see it. There we go, that looks pretty good. So if I were to simply start dragging these points around, they're very sharp, and that's going to kind of completely defeat the purpose. So I'm going to double click on each of them, just like that, to convert them into curves. I'm also going to do the same thing for the ones at the end too. And now we can go ahead and pull and push these lines like that, and now we have this really nice looking curve, right? And you can select multiple ones if you wanted to and move them all up just like that. Perfect. So we have our first rectangle, and you can kind of do this with one rectangle as well, but to really get a little bit fancy, we're going to use 2. And I'm going to move this out of the way so we really have some room to work with. So I've got one rectangle, and I'm going to grab this one and duplicate it over to the right. I can also flip it if I wanted to using this icon right at the top, just like that. And if I double click, maybe just to really make it a little bit different, I can go ahead and alter the curves as well on this shape, right? Just like that. Kerwin says, I was today years old when I learned how to modify paths in XD. Yeah, you can do that. Just double click on it and do your thing, right? Now for this one, if we were to simply leave it at this, you're not going to really be able to see the liquid and the effect taking place. So I might want to just drop the opacity to about, maybe 70%. And this is going to be the one in the front. And then maybe I'll just change the color just a touch, maybe a little bit of pink, right? Just like that. Perfect. Now, obviously, at this point, things are looking kind of crazy, right? We don't know what's going on. We don't see the heart. What's happening? Here's what we're going to do. What we need to do is we need to mask the heart in the background. We need to use the heart in the background as a mask. We need to kind of hide these curvy lines that we just created, right? So I'm going to name this top and bottom just so we know what we're working with. So to do that, I'm going to select the heart in the background. I'm going to duplicate it, Command and Control D, and simply move it to the top of the layer stack. You can do that with your keyboard shortcuts, or you can just drag it up and down in the layers, just like that. Now, with that shape at the top, what we want to do is use that as a mask. So I'm going to select the heart layer, which I'm going to name mask. Helps if I spell correctly. And I'm going to select all the layers underneath it, just like this. So I'm holding down Shift, clicking on that last one. Now with that done, under the object menu, we're going to go to mask with shape. And you saw me introduce masks yesterday in the challenge, but if you missed it, this is how you can create a mask. If you're on Windows, you would right click on an element on your canvas and then mask with shape as well. So that's essentially going to take all those layers underneath that mask and pop them inside. I'm going to name this heart. Now, of course, in the initial state, we don't want the heart to be filled in. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab these elements and just move them down, just like that, right? And that's it. That's the initial state. But in order to animate this thing, at least on a single artboard, we need to utilize components and states. So we have our first heart completed. This is the inactive heart. We're going to head up here to the right in our Properties Inspector, and we're going to press the plus button beside component, just like that. It's going to create our default state. And you'll notice if we hop over to our Assets panel, we have our component right there. But of course, we need to create an additional state so we can kick off this animation. So we're going to press the plus button one more time within the Properties Inspector, and we're going to create a new state. And this I'll just call filled in, just like that, right? And now that that new state is created and it's active, just like yesterday, all we have to do is make changes to this design. So I'm going to dive in here to my heart. I'm going to dive into the mask, and I'm going to simply start by moving these layers up. Now, if I were to simply do that, it would just fill it very linearly, right? We probably don't want that. And just to kind of show you what that would look like, if I go to my default state, I'm going to talk more about this in a second, but if I were to simply very quickly do an animation, let's go for none and 4 seconds, and then, do this, it looks very stiff. That's not what we want. We want that fluid to kind of start moving around. So in that case, let me go ahead and undo the interaction because we will talk about this shortly. I'm going to delete this interaction just like that. And in that case, we're going to dive in here. We're going to do a few things. We're going to start by grabbing the one on the right, and we're just going to move it over to the left, right? And then we're going to grab the one on the top, and we're going to move it over to the right. So we're moving them back and forth. We're kind of overlapping them like this, right? But we can go further with this. We can really make sure that the waves are moving. So on each of them, you can just double click and just make a few changes. You don't have to make too many changes, but just make a few changes just so that, things are moving a little bit, right? Just like this. And I can double click on this one, which is the one at the bottom. I'm gonna just move this a little bit. And Janine is saying, anyone else here never use XD in your life, but just love watching designers in their element. I love that. And you're absolutely right. I often watch many of the illustration shows on Adobe Live. Kyle T. Webster is coming up in just a few minutes. And I'm a terrible illustrator. I cannot draw for the life of me, but I love watching that stuff because they're just so talented, and it's sometimes very soothing and therapeutic, right? So I'm just going through and making a few changes. But the real trick is making them overlap, right? That's the real trick. And then doing these little changes is just icing on the cake. So we've got that done, right? Now, all we have to do now, if all went well, is just prototype this thing. So I'm going to make sure to go back to my default state right up here. and I'm going to hop into prototype mode. And because we're not working with multiple artboards, we have this all on a single artboard and various components, I'm simply going to click on this blue handle, just like this. It's going to sprout out that little blue wire. I'm going to make sure that I have the filled in destination selected. It's going to automatically default to Auto-Animate. And for this one, just because I really want this to take a while, again, this is probably not practical when you're dealing with a social media application, but for this particular example, we're going to go with 5 seconds. It's a lot of time, again, not practical, but you're going to be able to see all the waves and liquid in action. So we have that done. We're going to go ahead and press the play button at the top. And here we go. Let me actually move this out of the way a little bit so we can see what we're dealing with. And are we ready for this? Let's hope this went well. Ready? Here we go. Look at that. Wow. Isn't that actually looks fairly natural. And all we did was we used 2 rectangles, we made a bunch of curves, and then we just swapped their position essentially. Let me do that again. Look at that. Woo. Isn't that fancy, right? Vipin is saying the heart was border based, right? After masking, how did it become fill type? So masks ignore the borders. You can't just have a border based mask unless I believe you convert it into a path and only have a border, I believe, possibly. Everyone loves it. Wow. Ooh, nice. Heart, get out. Isn't that cool? So there we go. And we can also do it the other way around, right? So if we go into prototype mode, and you're going to see more of this tomorrow when I explore the mana bottle. Actually, let me hop over very quickly just to give you a sneak peek. If I go over to Dribbble, I think I'm not logged in. Okay, but I can just go dribbble.com/Pinsky. You can always give me a follow too. And essentially tomorrow I'm going to be redesigning this, which was created with a very similar, there it goes, very similar technique. It's like a health bottle. You can also do a mana bottle, for example, and uses a very similar technique to what I showed today, just with a few polishes here and there. So that's going to be a pretty fun stream. So we can also do it backwards. So if we have the filled in state selected, we're going to click on the wire, the interaction over to the right. We're going to select our default state inside of the properties inspector. We're going to keep all the easing options and durations the same. So now we can do this one more time. We can press on the heart. It's going to fill in, right? And then we can press on it again, and it just kind of fills down. Look at that. And Flavio's saying add a sound effect. I don't have one right now at my disposal, but you can absolutely do that, right? Within your properties inspector, right here at the bottom, you can add in an action, and that will allow you to add in a sound effect. And we did that on day number 2, I believe, with the navigation bar. So if I go over here, and if you listen closely, right? It adds a sound effect as the transition is taking place. So that was a lot of fun. Now the big question is, how do you use this within your projects like that social media app? The first question you want to ask yourself is, should you use this in your applications? You know, on Twitter, for example, I think on the desktop application, when you click on a heart, it does a kind of like an explosion. And that's nice. It's very subtle. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's like probably 0.2 or 0.4 seconds. This 5-second animation, you do not want to use in your actual applications, right? However, if you wanted to, here's how it can be done. So we have our master component right here. Again, sometimes I find it beneficial to design very large, especially if I'm going to be maybe exporting it, recording a movie, and then uploading it on Dribbble, for example. But I can go ahead and copy this, right? And I can go over here. We have our repeat grid. I can dive in here. We've got our path for our heart. I'm simply going to delete that. Now, still inside of that repeat grid, I'm going to paste the heart. Now, obviously it's way too big, and you can kind of see that it's mirroring it on all the repeat grid cells. So I'm going to start by just dropping the size down to about 15 pixels. I look like a professor. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's a compliment. I don't know. I'm going to turn off responsive resize so none of the borders or any paths get a little bit wonky. I'm going to lock the aspect ratio, and I'll go for about 15 pixels high, right? Now, let's go find it, because there it goes. It's all the way up there, right? And I'm going to move it into place. Now, you did notice that the border, because the borders don't scale, The border we have to change. We'll get to that in a second. If we go to our filled state, we have to do that again because the scaling changes do not sync between the different states. So I'm going to just simply lock that. I'm going to do 15 pixels and it pops it right into place. So we have our filled in state and we have our default state. Of course, we need to make some changes to the border. And because these are instances of the master component, we'd have to do it on both. So what I'm going to do, and by the way, the team is working on a lot of interesting things to make this process a little bit less painful. Not that it's painful now, it just requires an extra step or two. But the team is working on some really cool stuff. So I've got the heart selected. I'm simply going to drop the size of the border quite a bit. Let's go for maybe 2 pixels. What does that look like? 2 might be a little bit too much, to be honest. So let's drop this one more time. Let's go for 1.5. And I'm going to make sure that the color is the same as the other shapes over here, right? The other icons. Now with that, I'm just going to make sure that I also change the filled in one, at least the border on that one, right? So it's going to be 1.5, just like that. And I'm going to sample this color right there. Perfect. All right, so we have our small heart. Jennifer's saying, I'm late. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome. You can always just grab that little scrubber on YouTube and whoop, drag it back, and you'll be able to rewatch from the beginning. Or if this is over already, you can always rewatch it from scratch. All right, so we've got that, and it also duplicated this inside of all of our repeat grid cells. And now we can play this. It's going to be very difficult to see. Maybe I'll zoom in just a little bit. And if we tap on that, you can kind of see it's doing its thing. You see it? Eee, there it goes. Again, not practical for an actual social media application because it's incredibly slow. But, you know, you can do it, I suppose. You can also override interactions on your instances. So if I were to go here to my master component of this heart and change the prototyping to, let's say, 0.2 seconds, it would change it across all of them. But maybe I want the master component to remain the 5 seconds that it was. So in that case, I can just hop in here to the instance, right? And I can change this from, let's say, 5 seconds to 0.8. And now if I zoom in here, that's not bad. It's hard to see, especially if you're not zoomed in, right? But it does its thing, right? It's kind of fun. And then of course you can do it on the filled in state, just like this. I go down to, what was it, 0.8 seconds, something like that. So I can click on that, it unfills. And you have to do it on the other repeat grid as well, because again, component states and components are meant to be overridden within a repeat grid. So just keep that in mind, right? Probably the best idea is to nail this down first and the interactions and then put them into a repeat grid. So there's lots of options. Now I did see somebody in the chat earlier asking, how do you create an exploding heart? It might have been Vipin, possibly. And I'm gonna, you would have 2 minutes left, something like that. Probably won't be able to do it in 2 minutes. However, I do have a video on YouTube on, it's one of those 5-minute challenges you can also find on letsxd.com/challenges. It is how to create an exploding heart. But let's go ahead and very quickly, let's see if we can do this in 2 minutes. I doubt it, but we're gonna try. So we've got our polygon. We've got that. For this one, let's just go for something like this, because you will probably need a filled in icon. We're gonna grab a line, draw a line like this. I can round out the corners a little bit, or the caps, right? Make the borders a little bit thicker. Now for this state, it's going to be, see, this one doesn't line up, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. This one's going to be a little bit just like that. We're going to duplicate it. One here, duplicate it, one here, duplicate it, one here-ish. This probably doesn't make sense, but we're gonna run with this. There we go. And I'm going to move these behind the heart. Let's go ahead and turn all this into a component, create one more new state, exploded. This is a very basic example of this idea, right? Again, letsxd.com/challenges, and you'll be able to see the actual, it's more of a longer tutorial. Well, it's a 5-minute or so. So we've got that. Now we're going to grab these lines and kind of just move them outwards like this, right? Like that. We've got line, this one over here. I don't know. We're going to move it somewhere over here, make it a little bit smaller. We've got this one. Let's move it over here, make that smaller. This one, right? Again, this is super basic in 2 minutes, But then we're going to grab these, turn down the opacity, and now we have our two states. We have our initial state, which we can now wire up, auto-animate, go to exploded. Let's go for maybe a snap, and we'll do 0.6 seconds. Let's see what this looks like. Pew! Right? And of course you can add colors and that sort of thing. But you know, for 2 minutes, that wasn't too bad. One more time. Pew! I tried, right? But the point is, the animated heart that we created over here is just so liquidy and fun. Look at that thing go. Fancy. All right, that will do it for me for today. Stick around in just a few minutes. Kyle T. Webster is coming up with some amazing drawing. And then after that, Val and Logan are coming up. It's gonna be a good time. So stick around. I'm gonna be back tomorrow with my masterclass at 12 o'clock Pacific time. And then I have my last daily creative challenge at 2 o'clock Pacific time. Big thank you to Anna and Christina and Elizabeth and Annie and Cara and Sam and everyone else. I'll see you all tomorrow.